know some people want to get back to the cricket, just to see what's going on. You know, by all means, if you've got a television in the corner of the room, if you want to keep us all updated, that'd be very, very nice. Now, do we have any apologies for absence? I believe we've got apologies from Bob, Councillor Bob Slay, and Adrian Andrew from Walsall. George, if he's online, I can't see him, has to leave at 5. So that being the case, can I just say, in order to be chorus, that paper, if it's getting close to 5, we will have to take it before 5. But I'm not sure. George Duggins, are you here, George? Somebody will tell me what that actually means in terms of chorusy. It's far beyond me.
Chair, if I can help, so we've also had apologies. Tom Wesley, the Vice Chair, Councillor Bob Slay, you've said, Stuart Croft from the higher education sector. Just to point out around chorusy, so obviously we are we're meeting online, and we'll all know about the regulations about needing to meet in person. So it's just to bear that in mind. But I think the reports that are with you are for noting information.
And so any of those decisions that we are making today, i.e. certainly the UKS Shared Prosperity Funds, that will just go with our noting and general support, will it?
Yeah, and if the minutes from this meeting will go onto the Combined Authority Board that's in a couple of weeks as well. So if there's anything that needs ratification, then you'll be able to do that formally at the board on the 15th.
Okay. Cheers, thank you very much. Does anybody have any declaration? Oh, sorry, I didn't bring Sarah in. Sarah, I did see your thumb up before.
No, it's fine. Thanks. Dan's just covered that Tom Wesley sent apologies, so thanks very much. But Lindsay Flynn, Deputy Chair from the Black Country LEP, is on the call today. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome, Lindsay. Okay, cheers, thanks. Any declarations of interest by anybody? Nothing seen. I'm going to move on from the Chair's remarks. I do talk far too much, so I'm going to move straight on, but obviously welcome. And then the minutes of the 13th of May, are they a correct record? Thank you very much. And then we're going to go straight on to Delmet, who's going to look at the economic conditions across the whole of the West Midlands. Delmet, it's over to you.
Many thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Just to very briefly update the board on the trends that we're seeing in the local economy. The latest data sets are set out in the company dashboard in detail. So we're halfway through now, which we will know we're all seeing as quite a turbulent year for businesses and the whole economy. We know that inflation is heading towards those double-digit figures, which is weighing heavily now on the companies and the communities across the region. Stagflation looks like it's set to grip many countries across Europe and worldwide. So we know in particular there's 4 pinch points for businesses: labour costs and shortages, with that increasing demand for higher wages being coupled with a shortage of capable workers is really impacting on the labour market. Utility costs, obviously the rising costs, energy costs for businesses, and those particularly not protected by the energy cap, is going to have a real impact in October when we see those further rises. Alongside those fuel costs, both as an input to production and in relation to distribution, is also rising those input costs, and alongside the material and commodity costs and shortages. So these growing costs are cross-sector, and they're unfortunately now restricting the regional economic growth rebound, which we had anticipated this year as the world emerged from the depths of the pandemic. So now with this cash flow in businesses been really severely damaged, we're starting to see now an uptick in company insolvencies and that wider economic deturn. So the West Midlands Business Activity Index, that's gone down now to 49.7 in May 2022. So that's the first contraction in 16 months. So businesses across the region really feeling it, driven by these inflationary pressures, the subdued demand, the challenging economic conditions, and the input shortages. The official gross value added data in 2020 showed a decline down to £103 billion for the 3LEP geography, 4.5% decrease, reflecting but greater than that national trend. And the sort of more up-to-date quarterly GDP for the region shows the West Midlands contracting by 0.6%, while England grew by 0.6%. So we're showing this decline being driven by the production and the financial sectors, and some growth in the construction and the food sectors. We know how important trade is to the region, and we're seeing £8 billion less exports now than 3 years ago. But we are seeing some rises, with £1 billion rise over the last year. And we are positively seeing some examples from businesses telling us how they are looking to reshore and use these local supply chains now as components and materials from, because these global suppliers now finding not of sufficient quality or cost for the market. So this underlying resilience that we have in the region's business economy, and that confidence in the West Midlands offer as a place for investment, that has been reported in the recent data on FDI, where you have the West Midlands CA is still a top destination for foreign direct investment. And even during the years of the pandemic, the FDI projects have held strong, and they've increased year on year. Labour market, we are starting to see now the claimants continuing to fall, and some areas down to pre-pandemic levels. And this is bolstered by the census results that came out this week, which sees that an area of considerable population growth, Birmingham local authority having the highest increase, and the West Midlands 7 Met having the highest young population across England. So some challenging times there, but some opportunities, and hopefully sets the contents for the papers further in the agenda. Many thanks.
Cheers, Delma. Thanks very much. Just taking Chair's license, if I ever can just ask you, whilst generally across the West Midlands employment rate remains high and continues to grow, does that mask, and therefore the unemployment rate, does that mask certain parts of the conurbations that are perhaps not doing so well? So are some of us riding on the backs of t'others?
Very mixed picture across the region, as you would expect. Not all areas now claimant counts in some areas are back to pre-pandemic levels, but some areas we know are still challenged. There's still high levels of youth claimants in some areas. We're seeing a lot of churn in the labour market and a change in participation with those that are previously looked after family and home moving into the labour market. So a lot of change and variation. It's very different by local authority level, so happy to provide further detail there so we can really understand those trends, but as you say, not all areas as positive as others.
I mean, I only say that just to drive home that the fact that we have to be smarter going forward, don't we? We have to use all the intelligence and evidence we have to say, well, let's just look at the plan for growth, which we'll talk about later. Where does extra money going to help to grow at speed? Where are there parts of the economy that with a small amount, you know what I'm talking about, a small amount, a reasonable amount of finance can give us the best benefit? So, I mean, that's the type of evidence I'll certainly look to be going forward, because we wish we had everything for everybody, but we know that's not the case. So, we're going to have to use that evidence, use it smartly in the future. Thanks, Delma. Any more comments or questions? No, can't. Oh, Andy, yes, please.
Yeah, Ian, sorry to be slow. Three things, Delma. Number one, census. Obviously really important, so thank you for raising it. I've not got my brain around it yet. Are you going to do a little summary of it for everyone? That would be really helpful. Number two, energy. So you draw out how important this is. Just so everybody knows, we've had a number of conversations at EIG, at various different discussions, where we are going to respond to this with what we're calling an energy task force. It sounds like mere bureaucracy, but it is very much focused on practical solutions. And I have to say, the Black Country LEP has been first class in starting to draw those out. So we will shortly be getting on with that, because I do think action is important around that. And then the third thing, really just to draw out what Ian says, that total number, whether it be for claimants, job rates, inactivity rates, it is right. There is a huge masking of differential results by different boroughs. And if we're honest, between the CA and the counties around us. So we do need to drill down there. But nevertheless, compared to where we were pre-pandemic, the job numbers in the CA area have rebounded very well. And so what's really interesting, Delma, in your data is the job numbers are strong, but the GDP numbers are weak. So there's a really interesting question about where new jobs are being created and where they're being lost. And sadly, it's not a good picture, because high value jobs in manufacturing are being lost and low value jobs in services are being created, is I think what's happening to sort of balance two apparently contradictory arguments.
Cheers, thank you. Colin, you did have your hand up. I know you've put something down in the chat, but I can't see it, so you may have to ask the question anyway. Colin.
I was going to mention the same point as Andy, just to mention the energy task force, which we spoke about last week, which I think is a really important initiative. And I had a question for Delma just about the impact of 2022, but I think the answer's probably no anyway, so it's okay.
So you haven't even answered the question because you know the answer. That's good. No problem. Sarah?
I was just going to input that one of the things that we're hearing, particularly from manufacturing in the automotive supply chain, is the move from this just-in-time model to obviously having to keep stock. Like the just-in-time isn't a business model that can work, particularly for those in the supply chain with contracts with the OEMs. So what the issue that they've got, and I don't know if we're collecting any data on this, is access to working capital. The banks don't really lend for working capital. I know there's some work being looked at in terms of investment as a region, but I'm just wondering if we're working with the banks potentially to capture some of the data that they've got around the amount of money that businesses do have to invest. I think that is a strong picture for the West Midlands, but as you pointed out, it's not always in the right place, but also the issue that our manufacturers are going to have or are having, moving from this just-in-time model that obviously they've run for a number of years to having to keep stock.
Thanks, Sarah. Delma, do you want to pick any of them pieces up for us, please?
Yeah, certainly. I will follow up. I'll circulate the census, and the energy's been covered. And yeah, we'll have a look. That's a really good point in terms of the supply chains and a complete change in terms of business operation policy. And there's a lot of good research going in that. And we'll have a look at what we can access in terms of that.
Okay, thank you. I think we all saw the on-screen message. George Duggins is having difficulties getting in, but no doubt he'll keep trying. Anything further? Can't see anything. So, was there any? I'll put it away. Yeah. Sorry, Andy. Do you want to come back in? Do apologise.
Just very quickly, maybe helpful if I answered Peter Hughes' question in the chat while we can do. So rail and the Commonwealth Games, simply put, a full contingency is in place, basically securing any bus we can from anywhere across the country, fully costed already. It won't be able to deal with all potential damage, but the action has already been taken.
Cheers, Andy. Thank you. Happy to note, everybody. Cheers. And then we're going to go on to a progress update on the integration. And I believe Julie's going to take us through that. Julie?
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Chair. So This is just a paper to note, no decisions required, and really just an update on the work that's been happening with colleagues across the 3 of our LEPs to move towards the integration piece. Lots of conversations going on with local authorities as well, critical role to play in helping to shape what future arrangements need to look like. And we're starting to get into some of the detail now around structures, which will help, I think, to give a clear sense of direction to partners and to staff. So you'll remember the white paper and then subsequent letter from government set out the broad direction of travel in terms of the functions to be transferred to LEPs. We also had at the same time confirmation of funding for this year, which saw a 25% reduction in core funding to LEPs and a 50% reduction to growth hubs. So again, moving forward, one of our assumptions is that this funding will not be restored, and if anything will be reduced further, not least because the geographic footprint will go from a 3 LEP broader geography to a 7 MET geography. So the sums involved are smaller, and that does have a bearing, and the paper sets out some of those core activities that we expect to be funded from that. And what we've said in terms of future structures is that the CA will be accountable moving forward for delivery of some of those new functions. So whether it's digital skills partnerships or maintaining the overview on growth hubs. And therefore, we will not expect to transfer that money out to LEPs in future. Rather, we are working with colleagues and local authorities to understand where those functions are best discharged and where those roles will sit. So expecting a combination of roles at the CA or potentially in local authorities, for example, around the assurance of legacy programmes. A lot of detail to go on, but we're trying, I think, to be as clear as possible, as precise as possible, and to give clear messages to LEPs. In terms of growth hubs, what we've said is that that's a slightly more tricky conversation in that we don't yet know if there will be a budget from BEIS. As we said, there's been a 50% reduction, and as of yet, BEIS have not confirmed that there will be any future funding at all. In fact, they're going through an approach at the moment, which is bringing a lot of stuff back in-house into national delivery. But what we've said is, looking at this, we also need to be cognizant, and I know it's on the agenda for later, of shared prosperity fund, because actually whilst we can't give core funding to growth hubs, there is an opportunity, if this is part of the broader economic functions work, if local authorities, if we respond and say that we expect growth hubs to be primary delivery vehicle for business support, then there could be future income coming to them through shared prosperity. So it's a live discussion at the moment. I don't think we've settled on anything. Each of the sub-regions is talking with partners about what are the best delivery routes going forward. So it's just to keep that one in play. Things are not decided, but clearly that could have a bearing on future sustainability. And as you'd appreciate, this is tricky stuff, sensitive stuff. LEPs have asked where possible that we get clarity on that by September to inform future operating models. We've included an update from our LEPs in terms of where people are with local discussions, but I think probably fair to say these are still very much in play, lots happening, lots of detail being worked up. But broadly, Coventry and Warwickshire are looking as an operational transition group, expecting there to be a Coventry and Warwickshire vehicle going forward that will discharge activities that the 2 local authorities will invest in to keep that going. At the moment, Black Country, I think the feedback we've had is unlikely to keep the LEP going as it is currently, but obviously the consortium predated the LEP, and colleagues are looking at what the future of that might be. And Birmingham and Solihull discussions are still continuing and very live. So lots to happen. We're trying to keep conversations as open and transparent as possible, recognising not least staff, businesses, stakeholders all need to understand as soon as possible what the future looks like, and making sure that we retain expertise and capacity in the region as well. The other thing to note, and we've had some really good, useful conversations around embedding the voice of the private sector. At the moment, that is reflected in the CA's constitution, with the 3 LEP chairs having a position on the CA board, non-voting, non-constituent members, but position on the board. Moving forward, that clearly will depend on what the future status of LEPs is. I think again, from a lot of the discussions that have taken place, an absolute recognition and commitment to how important the voice of the private sector is at all levels of decision making and informing policy across the both local and combined authority. But a sense that actually there's probably a lot more that's already happening, that by starting to map out how the private sector is represented in different groups, which could be informally through EIG, we've touched on that, the Regional Business Council, a whole host of different policy groups, thematic groups that the CA has, for example, Commercial Property Group, Energy Capital, Innovation Board, and I know Mike has joined us today, that making sure we've mapped that out so we're clear about how the private sector voice is embedded, and that feels like an area to be strengthened rather than necessarily looking to create a new constitutional arrangement with people on the CA board. That would have to be done with government. So that's where we are. It's an update. I'm very happy to take any questions or comments, and thanks to colleagues for all the work that's been going on behind the scenes to get us through this. It's not always easy, and I think people have entered into a spirit of real kind of willingness to engage and to support.
Who came first? Oh, Councillor Ian Court, you were first apparently. Over to you, sir.
I don't mind being first, last, anything. I'm sort of grateful for that, Julie, for that, for what you've just said. I mean, this is all work in progress, basically, isn't it? In many ways. But I was just interested in your comments about voice of business, and I mean, I don't think I would see the need for another voice on the board. However, I'm really not convinced that the way we're going is going to improve the voice of business in the context of, well, you know, Growth Hub funding's going down. I know that's slightly different. You know, we're losing the economic geography of the LEPs on the, you know, that seems to be happening. I'm sort of curious, actually, that one of the comments in the at the beginning of the report says 1.2, recognising that the Warwickshire element of the Coventry-Warwickshire LEP will follow a different pathway. I've got the right report, haven't I? Yes. And I think, well, what's that all about then? You know, so are we going to have a region now that is 7 Mets only? With, you know, quite frankly, I don't know where I'll stand for a start. So I think we need to think rather more cleverly and innovatively about how we, you know, integrate a business voice. And I'm not particularly satisfied that it's just going to be lost in the hierarchy, so to speak. In the, you know, because someone said to me this week that they feel remote, and this is in business, you know, remote from whatever the CA is doing, and this is very worrying. So, you know, I haven't got an answer to this, except that there may be a case for more democratic, you know, member involvement in this. But it's worrying me. It's worrying me because I think, you know, we're going in potentially in the wrong way.
All right, Ian. Listen, I think you make a good point, and certainly on behalf of businesses, and, you know, and that's what this is about, is to say, right, here's an update. It's already been highlighted that the role of businesses going forward is a potential issue, or is an issue, and more work needs to be done. I'd certainly like to see, you know, more work done with the SMEs, you know, because they're the bedrock. Certainly of Wolverhampton, you know, a lot of that is the bedrock. So I think we all agree more work needs to be done. I'm going to go to Sarah next. Sarah?
I was just going to bring in, Lindsay and I went to a LEP network/BASE event last Monday. And I mean, we're not the first to be doing this. London, the Liverpool City region and the Leeds City region have all done successful integrations with mayoral combined authorities. They gave a presentation, an interactive session. It was really useful, certainly from my perspective, and they are more than happy to come and talk through what they've done with us and how they've made sure that the voice of business you know, is still there, and exactly as already been mentioned, remains independent and diverse. I think that's the key thing about it being representative of our regional economy, which I think the LEP boards have done very, very well. So it was just an offer from all or any of those regions. They would be more than happy to come and have a conversation with us about how they've integrated successfully.
Listen, thank you very much, Sarah. I mean, that is another, certainly another avenue we should undertake. We don't have to reinvent everything, do we? If somebody's already done something and it suits us, then why wouldn't we use it or use parts of it? So I think we'll certainly make contact to see if there is more that can be done. Corin?
Thanks. Just to follow up Councillor Court's point, and Sarah's actually, I think we've got a few challenges, haven't we, with the businesses. One is to get as wide a group of new active faces involved in the process as possible, so it's not the same old people doing it from the business world. Now I'll put myself in the category of the same old face. The second part is that the communication doesn't just have to come through boards at the West Midlands Combined Authority, does it? A more imaginative use of getting the information out to businesses is something that we need to think about between us. We've got the contacts. It's just sometimes we rely on old processes like newsletters and emails, those sort of things, a little bit too much. And we need to make sure that our business community, the diversity of it, is actually reflected in the way we speak to businesses. So maybe it's worth thinking, as this pans out, not just about the formal structure, but about a comms plan that does something a little bit differently to get that message to every part of the West Midlands business community.
Cheers, Colin. Absolutely agree with you 100%. We have to do things differently. We want to be as inclusive as possible. There are new businesses out there that I certainly don't understand, and the way they communicate is totally different the way perhaps you and I would communicate in the past. That's not saying we're old, mate. We're not that old, but I understand and take your point. Absolutely right. Okay. Any further? So I think Julie's got. Julie, are you happy just to come back on that? Obviously, the major issue or the issue still to explore is that further work on representation. Julie.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and I think really helpful, and thanks for the Office of Support, Sarah. We will absolutely want to pick up other places that have done this first, and making sure, as people have said, we perhaps challenge ourselves to be as innovative as possible, because not least for some of the issues that we're facing, the more that we hear from diverse groups of business, particularly SMEs, I think the more important for us. So yeah, we will pick that up and update at the next board meeting.
Okay, cheers. Any further than anybody? If not, good to know. Thank you. And then we're moving on to 7, the Shared Prosperity Funds. And Fiona is going to take us through that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, everyone. You have a paper in front of you. I won't go through the whole detail, but I do want to pick out a few key points just to make sure that we get the messaging right. So this paper very much builds on discussions that we've previously had here. Since then, when we looked at a number of principles in which we would allocate UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we've had extensive consultation with local authorities on the splits across investment priorities, and also about local priorities for each area. What we are doing is a dual approach of both reflecting the current restrictions and rules around UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but also pushing back with central government. And you'll see as an annex to the paper a letter from the Mayor about some of the key things we would like to see changed. We are going to continue to push those as well as following the rules as they currently are. The principles, just to remind you, and the feedback from local authorities, is that we would have a significant focus on employment support. We would look to develop an efficient and effective approach to business support, building on the business support review, so that we were able to sustainably fund a comprehensive business support offer across the region. We would look to use wider skills funding to reduce pressure on UK SPF, so looking at how we can use the adult education budget to do that. and that we would, for our communities and place and our people and skills elements, there would be local determination for those to make sure that our offer could be as locally determined and as locally responsive as possible. We have the opportunity to take 4% administration, and we will be doing that while the combined authority is the accountable body, and there's some work to be done there. We also recognise the additional work that local authorities will have to do, and so we're mapping out the various responsibilities across the 7 Met and the combined authority, and we'll make sure that that 4% reflects the balance of work. What we are doing at the moment, as well as continuing to engage with the local authorities, is to develop a high-level investment plan, and I will come on to that in a little bit more detail, just to give you a sense of what it looks like. But it's really high level. It's a broad ambition with our key areas of focus. We don't need to put projects in, we don't need to put specifics in, and actually importantly, it's really subject to change. So change over time, change as our plans develop, and of course subject to change as we get an outcome on our Trailblazer devolution deal. As you'll see in the paper, our starting position is that we have a 50-50 split between business support and other areas which are prioritised locally. This is very much our starting position in order that we can develop our high-level investment plan. The 50% on business support is so we can have that consistent and coherent offer that we will develop with you as local authorities. We will co-locate with local services and enable us to take forward the business support review. The 50% procured locally is so that we've got maximum flexibility in each local area according to local need. What we know is that as we come to develop the detail of what this looks like, particularly in relation to business support, those figures will, that 50-50 will change, but it's a starting position. So we've got some parameters to develop the high level plan. And we will refine that as the business support plan is developed. You will also note in the paper the 70-30 methodology that central government developed in order to determine allocations. We have been asked to explore an alternative method of that, and that's going to be discussed at Mayor and Met Leaders tomorrow. So that's noted for you, but for discussion tomorrow. What I want to share with you just before I finish, and I'll do this with slides, is just some detail on our high level plan. And to remind you, this is the document that has to be submitted by the 1st of October. Can I check that you can see that? Yeah, everyone can see that first slide.
Yes, and it's got to be in by the 1st of August.
The 1st of August, yes.
Oh, you had until the 1st of October. Yes,
sorry, 1st of August, sorry. So the high level plan that you will be able to see there, the bullet points and ticks show what we've got to include. So some context, which we have written, selected interventions and outcomes, which we are deriving from local authority plans, which I will come on to. We can include identified projects, but we will not be doing this. We are not ready to do that, and so we will not be putting it in the form. And having spoken to other combined authorities, that's exactly the position that they are taking too. There's a space for us to identify at-risk people and skills provision in the voluntary and community sector that at this point we could confirm we can support. If we're not able to do that, what most local authorities are proposing to do is to put money in communities in place for the voluntary sector, and we can come to that in more detail later. We also need to write a small amount on our approach to stakeholder engagement, governance and MP support. Our intention to work with local authorities outside of the 7 Met area, and on that we don't have to put specifics, but we're just indicating we may want to do that, particularly on business support, and then write something briefly about capacity and capability of the team to manage the funding. So it's very, very high level, no detail on projects. We do have to complete a couple of spreadsheets on expenditure profile and deliverables, but we are clear in each of those that these are broad indications only, that the detail will be revised once projects are confirmed. We've spoken to our assessor of our application form, And they have advised, and certainly other CAs are taking this approach, that we take a small number of investment priorities and outcomes that gives an indication of direction of travel, recognising that these will change over time. So although we've asked local authorities to identify all of the interventions that they might want to select, we are proposing that we take 4 or 5 in each area and that we select those for the purposes of the investment plan. Let me just move on. So under communities in place, so these are the list of investment priorities within each of the themes. And what we are proposing out of the full list that you will see on the screen, that those in black are the ones that we select. Those are the ones which are most commonly chosen by the local authorities that we have asked to submit their details from, and actually we think encapsulate most of what we want to do. We are reserving the right to extend it later, but actually being able to identify a small number will be helpful in writing the plan. Once we've chosen those, this is a tick list. This is all we have to do on the outcomes, is we have to tick those outcomes that relate to the investment priorities that we have selected. And so once we've got an agreement on the interventions, we will go back and tick a small number of outcomes that we will measure throughout the lifetime of the programme. And again, these are subject to change once the plan has been submitted and we can do our detailed work. The same is true on business support. The business support investment could cover a whole range of these interventions, as you can imagine, but we are trying to narrow down to a small number, and we think that the ones that we have chosen here are sufficiently broad that the activities that come through the business support review and through local plans do fall under these. And again, a list of outcomes that we need to tick. We'll share these slides afterwards so you'll be able to have a look. And then finally on people and skills, a very similar approach. And as I mentioned earlier, we are suggesting that our people and skills investment is focused on employment support because we've got the adult education budget in which we can focus on skills. There's also been a strong theme around investment in digital skills and digital inclusion. And so we're selecting that one as well. So 4 for people and skills. And similarly, a list of outcomes that we would be able to select from, and we'll get a small list once we have identified those interventions. Now, just to finish, the high-level plan has to be submitted by the 1st of August, following approval at the CA board on the 15th of July. And we are expecting that from some point around October, we will get approval. But actually, there's a lot of work that we expect to take place over the summer, because we want to get from these top-level plans, these broad indicators, into some detailed plans. So what we're proposing to do that is that we have fortnightly meetings with each of the local authorities to develop those detailed plans. We need to get clearer detail on that first year, but also a strategic view on years 2 and 3, and we need to get some detail on deliverables and on expenditure. We will also consider together the business cases for voluntary and community sector projects that are at risk and take the proper time to do that. And meanwhile, there's a strand of work which looks at the detailed development of the business support strand in order to make sure that we get that right. And again, through one-to-one meetings with individual local authorities, but also through directors of economic development. We're just scoping out what the pathway through to approval will be, but we would expect for the September CA board that we would take an update of project proposals. Projects aren't in the investment plan, but we will need to work up them over the summer. We will have a local partnership board, which is the board that's set up as part of UK SBF and who will advise on implementation and delivery on the 19th of September, and then bring plans back to Economic Growth Board in September with a view for final sign-off of the SAF programme business case for UK SBF on the 18th of November. This is just a quick overview and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. I'm seeing a hand up there from room 109, and that's probably apt. Room 101. Julie, is this just an additional before I start?
Yeah, if that's all right, Chair. I think, James, to be very polite, I think one of the things that we would say is the process for this, you know, having to get a plan in to this timescale and actually, you know, we want to get it right is not helpful. I think some of the inflexibilities that we've seen from DLUC officials as well around what can or can't be funded, not helpful. There's your pack does include a copy of a letter that we sent into the minister to flag that, you know, the way in which this is being done does not feel within the spirit of devolution and trusting areas to work that up. And just to reiterate that, in a way, the plan is to get the money from government so that we can start then looking at how we best spend that regionally. There are some opportunities to do things differently. It's not a huge amount of cash, but we have opportunities to be smarter with how we look at it. But that is by doing it in a different way to perhaps the process that DLUC have set out. So just to reiterate that point, that the plan is very much a starting point, nothing is fixed. And particularly the work on business support, there's a lot for us to do to develop how that looks and feels going forward. It links to the previous conversation on LEPs and growth hubs. It very much wants to build to add value to what's there locally, both that which is funded through local authorities, but also some of the private sector, some of the work that chambers, etc. are doing. So there's a long way to go on it. What we're not saying is here's a regional pot that no one has a chance to. We very much see this board as having a critical role in shaping that going forward too. But I will pause there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we Andy and myself did write a letter to the minister outlining some of the conditions which are not conducive to trust and building a relationship, especially when talking about carryover or the skills 23-24. We're yet to have an answer. Julie's mentions about the actual pot. It's not enough. I think we're all agreed it's not enough. It doesn't represent what we actually already have coming off ERDF and ESF, and that's disappointing. But we are where we are. Fiona, and I take the point, I really do take the point, this is a high level plan, right? And for none of us to get stuck, we instantly get stuck, and it's a fault of us all on seeing numbers. At the end of the day, we will decide the numbers, but we've got to put something in before the 1st of August. Otherwise, we're not in the game. Now, we heard 50-50, we heard 70-30. I would ask people to not instantly get stuck on that. By all means, complain once we finally do get them numbers, and that's fine. But not yet. And the only other thing I just need to ask Fiona is for the bid for the 1st of August. You weren't talking about those individual proposals going forward for that as well, were you? The 5 from each. The 5.
So, what we have to do is we have to tick a list of interventions, and what we're suggesting and what we've been advised is to keep that as tight as possible so that we give a direction of travel, but we will have some very clear wording that we will add to it, which essentially says as we go through our process of identifying projects, we will come back to that list and confirm it in due time. This is all about getting the form in on time to give us space to look properly at what we want to do with the funds.
Okay, I mean, we're going somewhere that we haven't spoke about. We're going somewhere where I feel uncomfortable to say, let's tick these particular boxes. First off, it's going to the mayor and the leaders tomorrow, and we won't have seen site. Secondly, the papers are presumed for the CA board are delivered on Friday.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's something I've not heard about, and it's something we will have to talk about in the next few days if we need to go down that route. But I'm wary at the moment. you know, just because I'm a wary person. Let's just leave it like that. I hope people can appreciate we've got to do it and we've got to get it in. Don't get too het up on the numbers. And if we can be assured, don't get too stuck. Papers are published on Thursday. And if you can say to me, don't get too stuck, in fact, don't get stuck at all on the tick boxes, then I'm happy to go forward. If the tick boxes don't mean anything, which I think is a rubbish system, by the way, but if they're saying you have to tick 35 boxes or 5 per thing just to be in the game, then it just slightly worries me. Do you understand what I'm saying, Fiona?
Yeah, absolutely. We asked local authorities to identify the range of activity that they are thinking about at the minute against those list of interventions. When we compiled it, virtually every intervention had a tick by somebody. So one option is we just tick everything. However, we also have to then break down our outcomes and deliverables and budget against everything we have ticked. So what we're aware of the what other combined authorities are doing and what our assessor has suggested we do is pick those where there's most common agreement. And the ones that I've highlighted is by taking a spreadsheet of the responses from all local authorities and identifying those that have been most commonly selected.
So like a census, like a census, like an opinion poll, bit of a survey. We're not tied to it legally for the next 3 years. Julie?
Absolutely.
Just to add to that, I mean, it is a ridiculous tick box process, and you're damned if you do, you're damned if you aren't. I think we have a choice whether we tick everything, because at this moment we're not ruling everything out, or whether we take the advice and only tick a few. But either way, it's kind of a spurious accuracy, Ian, because what we're saying very clearly is this is the start. There's a lot of detail to go. So the plan is pretty meaningless at this point. Again, just being really open with people. We have got a lot of work to do, not least because some of the activities that certainly colleagues are interested in locally will deliver across all 3 pillars. They'll deliver for communities, they'll deliver for business. And currently this process, which is why it's so frustrating, doesn't allow for any of that to come through. It's a very old-fashioned, very, well, I think inappropriate way of judging it. So we are going to put in the least possible, but what we are saying, and what we'll be very clear about, is you cannot hold us to this because it's a pretty meaningless process at this stage, and we will do the work in region to get a better set of interventions agreed.
Okay, listen, I hope you don't mind if obviously if you can just take that little bit offline over the next 24, 48 hours, certainly before perhaps CA papers go out. You know, here what I was saying is, are people happy that we're going to put in on the 1st of August, this high-level plan? Don't get too stuck on the tick boxes. Don't get too stuck on the percentages. We know we have to bid for it. Let's put on our hat in the ring, and obviously we can take it from there, and we will decide, and this body will have oversight of those decisions by the CA board of where we actually put those percentages stroke project proposals. Is that all right? Does anybody need any more clarification than that at this stage? Ian says it's all right. Andy's stroking his chin. I think, yeah. Right.
I will just jump in, Ian, as you've mentioned my name. I mean, I think the first thing that should be said is I recognise this is very difficult, very suboptimal, and I think genuinely everybody's trying to work hard to find a way through it. And I know Julian and team have listened very carefully to all the feedback from local authorities. The one thing I would call out, though, is I think the decision in principle for us to allocate a substantial amount to business support is a good decision, because it does go back to the conversation that leaders had at the board last July, where we said we've got to step up here. And of course, it links back to the very first paper that Delma presented on the situation that we face. So I think if we do end up in that situation, it's a good decision, and obviously it's therefore helpful to have visibility of the much greater amount of money actually that there is for other skills interventions. So I do support that element of it very strongly.
Peter, I see Peter's got his hand up. put it back on mute.
Yeah. As is my want, I think any recommendations you're putting through would have to be with a proviso that the percentages are still to be agreed by the by the leaders. You know, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that everybody's on the same page with that. So I would ask, you know, from my point of view, with the recommendations that you have in front of you, that you have that proviso as part of it. You've said don't get hung up, but at the end of the day, we're accepting recommendations on the basis of things that haven't been agreed yet.
Yeah, listen, essentially, you're right, Pete. You're right. What we're saying essentially is, shall we put the bid in now?
Yeah.
And the officer's advice is we put it in, and I come back to what I said at the beginning. It would be for the leaders and the mayor at the very end of the day to decide the splits. I agree with the mayor about this before, and you know, you definitely say that from a portfolio hold, and the split between deprivation stroke how many people you've got in your place also has to be good. We are not doing that. We are only noting that we're putting the bid in, Pete. We've got to put it. We have to put a bid in now. We heard previously we can't hang around. We've only got 9 months now. When we get the money, you'll have read in the letter. We can't carry it over. You know, so we've got to spend this pretty sharpish, and then obviously it eases off a little bit. But that's all. I'm not going to put anyone and yourself in the position. We can't go back and say all we're doing is putting in is highlighting high level. We're putting in the bids, please. And I've been assured by the chair, which is me, that those percentages, and Andy, because he's smiling, and Andy, that those percentages we will talk about, and that's the meat of the argument. Is that okay? Sarah next, and then Ian C.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just a point about Warwickshire. I guess we didn't really answer Ian's question earlier because there isn't a kind of straightforward answer in terms of Warwickshire, but the commitment is very much to remain aligned with the CAO and obviously to keep that sub-regional structure. Now the team at the LEP are working very closely with the districts and boroughs on this. So I guess I'm just wondering, is there alignment already through the districts and boroughs being non-constituent authorities, or is that something you would like us to support you on?
Julie?
Yeah, so certainly representatives from Warwickshire are part of the group that is looking at this, and we're really keen that we continue to work as closely as possible. And apologies, I didn't properly answer Councillor Courts before. The funding that we get for shared perspective will just be for the 7 Mets. That's why there is a little bit of a there will be that difference, and that impacts on the pathways for LEP integration. But as we touched earlier, certainly from Coventry and Warwickshire, an absolute desire to maintain that economic geography. And what we've said is there'll be other places as well across and outside of the region that we'll want to keep working with, particularly from a business perspective. So we're keeping all things on the table. But the plan itself will only be for funding that directly delivers to the 7 Met area. So there will be a kind of narrowing of the focus there.
Although they will receive their own UK.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Ian C. Take your mute off button, brother.
I will indeed. Sorry about that. Yeah, I know you hadn't answered the question, and I didn't expect much of an answer really, because it's a difficult point. But you know, the point was that we're chopping off the districts. It's you know, there's a big change in place here, and I think the implications have got to be looked at from all our points of view. In terms of this, really just this proposal, I mean, we need to get the bid in. We need to do that. We need to, and thereafter there will be discussions about quantum, about funding and all those things. I've got things I shall want to discuss anyway. So supporting you, Ian. Let's get on with it.
All right, listen, thank you, and you sum that up as that's very nice. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, can we support that? We get that bid in. Actually, we can only note it. We've already heard that, but we can move forward. Is that everyone happy with that? Great. Thank you very much, and thanks Fiona and Julie for taking us through that. Agenda item 8, which is the Innovation Accelerator. Mike is going to take us through. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly Julie and Jonathan are there to sort of support any queries that may crop up. I think the paper is pretty clear. Just to remind everybody, we are one of 3 regions that have been invited to participate in this Innovation Accelerator. The other 2 are the Northwest and Glasgow. It's a 100 million pot divided across those 3. And as the paper indicates, this is the first start of a process where research money coming out of UKRI over the longer cycle, 4 or 5 year cycle time, will be, for the first time, there is a direction to place that money outside of the Golden Triangle. So the region potentially has the opportunity, through its network of universities, its innovation ecosystem, to benefit over the next 4 or 5 years with a significant uplift in its R&D investment through UKRI and UK Innovate. But we have to do this bit first to, if you like, demonstrate that we've got a accelerator program that can deliver the start of that process. The board, the Innovation Board, has been in existence for, as you know, 2 or 3 years, and we're actively engaged in putting the paper together that describes how we as a region, our strategy for leveraging this Innovation Accelerator, these funds, the 35 million pounds. We are focusing on 2 new areas of innovation because we've got some very, very deep but narrow expertise in the innovation space, particularly in automotive, life sciences, aerospace. But the aim of how we want to leverage this on behalf of the combined authority is to use this accelerator to broaden our innovation bandwidth, if you will, and look at clean tech and meditech, and the paper describes what those areas are. And we are actively engaged as well. In fact, they come as observers and active participants in the Innovation Board with UK Innovate and with BEIS, just to make sure that we're, there's no surprises as we develop this process. We're asking the Economic Growth Board just to endorse the approach we're taking. The business plan has been developed. The paper the draft paper, sort of highlighting our strategy, has been put into circulation, and we're taking comments, and that will be ready to be shared with our colleagues in UK Innovate and BEIS over the next few weeks. And we start getting real sort of later in the year when the bids come in. And my final point is, or 2 final points, is we've got to do 3 or 4 things, big things, within the 35 million pot. We don't want to spread the amounts too thinly, because we need to really get started in broadening that innovation bandwidth. But we also, and working with a growth company, we've got to recognise the international potential of this, of attracting interest from overseas in our innovation expertise. That's the ultimate end game. So there's a lot of work going on in making sure that the FDI element of this is fully recognised. So I'll stop there and see if there are any kind of general questions, and then I don't know if Julie or Jonathan want to add anything.
Cheers, Mike. And yeah, listen, I'm more than happy to offer you know, with general support, and of course more information will come out. My only query, and it's a genuine one, that under the clean tech, you know, it does mention, or I've heard that stuff like MMC, which is modern methods of construction, and other around brownfield technology, is to be involved. I would say that's, you know, and that's not just saying Wolverhampton, because we have some of that. Other places have as well. Without that, it could look very, very consensus if that isn't outlined. You know, talk about medicine and life sciences. It's come from the plan for growth. These two areas have come from the plan for growth, and I would just make sure, perhaps it's just in the presentation, Mike. You know, we need to say that these two items cover pockets of excellence across the whole of the West Midlands. I don't want anybody to come back and say, "Oh, you're just talking about Birmingham," because I hope that's, and in fact, I'm sure that's not the case. Mike, do you want to come back to that?
No, absolutely. It's region wide, and if one of the things that is on our agenda is, if you like, there's some kind of micro leveling up that we've got to do to recognise that our innovation, you know, where the places where innovation happens goes right across the region. Having said that, we don't want to ignore that in certain areas we have some excellent innovator delivery, but we really want to transfer that expertise across the whole of the region so that the whole of the region benefits. And you know, the National Brownfield Institute is one example, and there are others, as you know. So yeah, absolutely clear that this is not just about continuing to leverage the existing expertise that we have. It's about broadening it.
Cheers, Mike. Ian, your hand went up first.
I'm a bit confused, to be perfectly honest, because you mentioned, Mike, about 3 or 4 big pots. You don't want to dilute the use of the money, but then you're talking about broadening the sphere across the region. So it looks as though we're going to concentrate, but on the other hand, we're going to broaden it. And I didn't sense we were very specific about what we're actually going to target. In particular, can I have assurance that, you know, I mean, we talk about life sciences and so on, but, you know, health is the great thing. You know, are we going to have a good focus on health? So that's a question. Broadly, I'm very supportive of this. I mean, the one thing that hasn't come out of the SPFF, and it's hardly for me necessary to make the case, but it's the place of universities, certainly as chair of ESIT for so many years. The number of bids that came from universities for funding a number of wonderful projects was enormous. It was interesting I was at Aston University a few days ago talking about a variety of stuff, and to see how a number of technologies have come on and how many, but you know, so many of them have that little blue badge underneath, funded by ESIF. So there's an issue there, but I just want to make sure that, you know, we are giving the right focus, and that you know, effectively this is going to be you know, where exactly are you going to apply this funding?
Well, both on Meditech, and thank you for the question, on both Meditech and Clean Tech, they are being specifically called out as areas where we believe there's the opportunity to expand our innovation capability in the region. So this is not, you know, Meditech, if I could use that as an example, it's not about merely sort of investing further in well-established life science and health programs that already either have funding, already have activity. It's about broadening the base. And, you know, we have a great, you know, one of the areas is analytic skills and how that could apply to health tech. The other aspect of this is that, you know, we've got to stop thinking in sectors, because a lot of this innovation expertise is transferable. You know, precision engineering can be equally applied to the health sector as it can be to say, the automotive sector. Analytic skills can be transferred from the gaming industry into, the health analysis sector as more health response activities become online. So we're trying to create an environment where people are thinking differently about how we create the innovation space in the region. And what we want to do is be a leader in the country, if not internationally, how those transferable innovation skills can be applied to different areas. So it's not about just thinking about the established sectors, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think so. I understand that. I just wanted a bit more clarity on that. I mean, I probably should have said, obviously, I'm very keen on promoting our own interest in health innovation in our own in the hub area of the UKC, but which will be a benefit for the region. But thank you for that explanation.
Thank you, Peter. Go next. You're on mute, brother.
You refer to lots of workshops coming over the coming weeks, but in fact one must have been last week, the clean workshop. Now, yeah. What sort of take-up did you have there? I mean, I know of one company in particular that's very local to where I am. That would be ideal for for engaging in that sort of activity. And leading the way with technology, with clean energy. So what was the take up there, and what sort of interest was shown?
Very good. I think, and Jonathan might correct me, but there was certainly in excess of 60 physical delegates there, and I think there were a lot more online, right across the space. So not just businesses, but clearly the university and the research sector. So there was some really active engagement. And of course, the health tech one is today. And that, I mean, it's going to be a high-class problem. I don't think we're going to have any shortage of ideas. We're going to have to find a way of making sure that we don't dissipate to a level where we get no critical mass through this. Because we've actually got to, at the end of it, have moved the game on in terms of the region's innovation capability, and that means we've got to do some, a few things really well.
Yeah.
But could you let me have a list of the attendees, the actual industry attendees, please?
Sure.
I want to make sure that some of the local companies haven't missed out on this through it not being, filtered down enough. If you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay. I'm sure Jonathan and Jodie can handle that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers. And speaking of Jonathan and Julie, back to room 101.
Thank you, Chair. And just to carry on with really that flavour that Mike was setting up, the MedTech workshop happened this morning. I think we had 17 person and another 40-odd online joining. And this relates to kind of Councillor Court's point as well, that I just wanted to kind of bring to life, and follows to some degree the kind of conversation we were having with SPF earlier, that the approach to developing the Innovation Accelerator plan is very much one of kind of co-design with government and Innovate UK. This morning, as well as kind of the universities and businesses that Mike was mentioning, there was a kind of significant presence too from government agencies, Department for International Trade, also some of the research councils as well, who, as well as the Innovation Accelerator, we want to be able to explore how the Innovation Accelerator is supported by some of that wider activity and their firepower that they have too. So ensuring that they are kind of bedded in that design process is really important. The first stage of working with kind of Innovate is about providing this kind of direction, this high level direction, which is in the paper that you've seen, which the Innovation Board has kind of started to steer. But the point of those business workshops is really to laser in on the commercial opportunity that business sees, And then that will set the basis for ultimately then the range of programmes that we seek to kind of develop over the course of the rest of this year, and ultimately lead to the decision-making process that the Innovation Board and then onto the Economic Growth Board will take at the very end of this year. So when it comes to kind of business level, you know, what each business kind of can get out of the accelerator, it's about the kind of ways in which those programs that will be developed later in this year work. At the moment, we're on about kind of understanding that commercial opportunity, but we'll certainly be happy to kind of share the details of all of those attendees that attended and be able to continue that engagement process, not just with individual businesses, but with some of the kind of trade bodies and other cluster groups that exist across the region as we develop that over the rest of this year.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Everyone, happy to move on. Yeah, cheers, Mike. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
You've got our support. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then on to item 9, which is the plan for growth. Julie.
Thanks, Chair. Just again, another report for people to note and to invite any feedback on. A couple of key things. We do have an event this week which Mayor and the Chair are both speaking at, and as are some of our cluster leads as well, which really sets out, with a group of mainly private sector audience, but a combination, sets out some of the challenges that we know that we're facing. Dalma touched on a number of them today, but also how we as a region are coming together to respond to that. So we will talk about the plan for growth, which has been signed off from previously at board, very much focused on those clusters that have the potential for above average growth in areas of high value, but also some of the things that we've been talking about, how business system will be reconfigured, how, notwithstanding it's not enough funding, we will have shared prosperity fund as something we've regional control over. We do have our innovation accelerator, the work that's happening with the growth company across local authorities. So it's trying to bring a bit of a picture together of everything that's going on. The other thing just to note, we've previously talked at this board and the task and finish group that was looking in particular at the economic functions, and we've talked about cluster leadership. So we're now starting to pull together some thoughts really on what we mean by cluster leadership, and in particular the extent to which some of that is just about how businesses convene, and convene often without any support or intervention from the public sector, but how businesses come together. And as Mike touched on, sometimes those clusters aren't necessarily aligned to precise sectors, but then how we as public bodies can better support some of those. One of the key messages that came out of Plan for Growth was a lot of the interventions that are there from the public sector, be that support with location or relocation, support with investment and finance, support with skills. We're not always as joined up on this as we could be. So again, an opportunity for the region to be a bit more coherent, and the work that this board has started to look at in making sure we're all as aligned as possible to support some of those opportunities. So again, just to flag with people that work is in hand, and we will be bringing it back to this board for review as part of that economic coherence piece.
Thanks, Julie. Any questions or comments? Yes, Lindsay.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Julie, for that. I think I just wonder whether with the work around LEP integration, whether we need to be really clear and consistent on the vision in relation to this, and how we communicate it to get that kind of wider business buy-in to this. That the why really, I think, is a little bit. Obviously, Plan for Growth has been in place for a while, but I just wonder if now is an opportunity to be really clear and aligned on what that vision is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really good point, and hoping, Lindsay, we can do a little bit on that little bit of that on Thursday. But you know, I'm happy. I'm sure others are to take it up on that offer to get that message out as far as wide as possible. Please, if you can, by all means, turn up. We're having it in the Lighthouse, which is a beautiful place. We're having it, I believe, at the newly opened Medicine. I think there's already one in Birmingham, one in Codsall, and that's a fantastic place, especially if you like your fresh bread. So I hope, Julie, we are buying people refreshments. Yes, of course we are. Of course we are. So happy to see everybody on Thursday. Okay, and do you want to take us to the last piece, Jonathan, and that's the work programme?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so this reflects the work programme that we keep under review. I think as a result of the discussions at today's board as well, we'll look to take on some of the kind of insight we've got, particularly around the LEP integration and also the SPF activity and those decision points that will come through. We'll also ensure that the next meeting is kind of a manageable length. The work programme at the moment looks pretty full for the next session, but we'll ensure it's manageable and that we focus on those things particularly time critical.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any questions? I mean, talking about the length, yeah, by all means, we'll have a look to see if there's anything we can do. There are some meaty subjects coming up through the rest of the year, and I don't want, decision makers or people advising to feel that we're not getting enough of what we need, So we'll have a good look, and if we've got to do other things, we will do other things. I mean, that's our pledge back to everybody. Nobody's point of view is going to be left out. Ian C.
We've got some catching up to do, haven't we? There's a couple of items here that we didn't deal with today.
Well, you make the point, and that's what we're saying. We're going to have to. We don't want to be falling behind. But there was a couple of meaty points on today that we had to get through. Essential. Okay, listen, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. The people I'll see on Thursday. I will see you. The next date, the next meeting is in September. Not that you're going away enjoying yourselves or moving jobs like Mr. Crane, but there you go. I'm sure we'll still see you. Cheers, Colin. Cheers, everybody else. Thank you. Bye-bye.